Everybody, come on in. Introduce yourselves in the chat if you feel like it, and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. All right, so we'll get started in about 30 seconds here. Got a lot of people coming in, people introducing themselves. That's great. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Conforti. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the A2 2021 virtual discussion series. As always, our goal is to bring together association professionals with industry leaders and partners to bring value to the community. So we have one-on-one discussions, expert panels, product overviews, and other sessions to drive discussions on data, related topics, and all of that to help us drive performance and better serve our members. We always hope to do that in ways that are fun, engaging, and allow us to learn from each other in the process. So the series, as a reminder, is bi-weekly. It's on Thursdays at 3 p.m. And all the recordings for this and all the previous sessions are available to anyone that registers. During the session, we already are hearing from a number of people, so would love to hear from everyone, not just introductions, but questions, comments, any stories that you have that pertain to what we're talking about. And you can do that through the chat or the Q&A button. And if you do use the chat, just remember to change it to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see what you're talking about. So today, we're going to tackle another ongoing issue for association professionals, and this is how to keep our technology stacks current and optimized to drive that member experience and to answer the critical business questions. So as we headed into 2021, so many associations are either they're kicking off something that's new, or they're restarting or refocusing on digital transformations or similar types of efforts. And in doing that, they're either continuing the focus on, or maybe starting anew, the focus on optimizing, things that that were forced to, during the pandemic. So in other words, they have to get the most out of their technology products, the processes that go around those, and of course the staff. And all of that has really never been more important. So we're going to talk today about the overall technology stack, but we're going to focus on some parts of it: marketing, membership, events, and others. And as always, we're going to look at how data and analytics plays a critical role in all of those areas. So today we're joined by two expert consultants from Ricochet. They're a consultancy in the association space, and they help organizations optimize processes and technologies related to marketing, membership, and other areas. So let's go ahead and jump to some introductions. We'll start with Chris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Glody, the past Chief Marketing Officer of the American Bar Association, and I'm currently the Chief Consultant for Ricochet.
Hi, I'm Beth Power. I have been in the association space more than 20 years, and I'm a business analyst working with Chris at Ricochet right now.
All right, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm Bill Conforti, Senior VP of Strategy and Solutions with A2. So in that capacity, I spend a lot of time, working with clients and prospects on requirements and trying to make sure that our products and services are kind of aligned with those requirements. So again, welcome everyone. I'm going to give Chris a chance to talk about the company a bit.
Yep, Ricochet is a consultancy that specializes in transformations for associations. We focus on 3 areas where you try to bring change to your organization in the way it does marketing, in the way it does membership, and the way it does meetings. The 3 M's we call them. And while we don't necessarily start with technology, inevitably every project that we work with takes us to technical changes that are necessary. And so that led us to do this report. You can see that a lot of what we talk about today is covered in our new report just published this morning. You can all download that at ricochetadvice.com/ecosystem. And my co-author was Beth, who's been fantastic to work with.
Okay, so as we get started here, let's take a quick look at the agenda. So today, obviously, we're going to be talking about the evolution of the association tech stack. We'll start with a quick introduction. We'll go through some best practices, talking about how to design your tech stack and the pros and cons of some different approaches or different schools of thought for how your technology should be organized. We'll talk about the evolving models and how those models work to support BI and analytics to drive marketing, membership, and other critical business areas. Then we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. In fact, we'll have Q&A all along the session, but we'll wrap up with questions and answers and some key takeaways from Ricochet. So just by way of introduction, I'm going to go through a couple of things, and some of these slides are kind of, or at least the concepts are familiar, right? So the center of the universe, right? And so this was kind of just very loosely, right? In the 2000s, right? We used to talk about technology, and the AMS was very much the center of the universe, and AMS was big and massive, and many of them still are, but it's big because it did a lot of the core functions that your association was involved in, and so there's just a handful of other applications, and you have these integrations which are maybe 2-way, maybe 1-way, but the idea is that you have a big AMS that's doing most of the work, and then a handful of other external source systems, and you have to manage these integrations. Each one of these blue arrows represents an integration, which is costly, and it's difficult to maintain in some cases, and the data is essentially trapped right inside the AMS in many cases. So those were big, they were full featured, they were customizable, right? Highly customizable. In some cases, maybe too much so, to the point that eventually a lot of organizations were looking to go backwards, to get closer to baseline, to decustomize, and then modify so that they're looking at an architecture which is maybe something like this, right? And so so loosely speaking, in the 2010s, A2, for example, was just really getting into the analytics business. And our proposal and our theory was that no, the AMS should not be the center of the universe. It's a spoke, right? So it's maybe the AMS is this big green dot here, and all of your other applications, all your other source systems are then feeding data into a central repository or a data warehouse. Now, interestingly, these are mostly 1-way integrations, right? Because you're pushing data into the warehouse, but don't necessarily push it back out to update those source systems. But the idea, though, that the AMS is a spoke, not the hub, I think that really started to take off and gain some traction. The AMS being for storage of transactional data, and the warehouse being the central repository for your analytical data, right? And so that all made sense. And as a company, this was a big part of our value proposition. We were successfully, educating the market along these lines, and it made sense. So when you think of it in terms of analytical data, you could think of the ecosystem of analytical data looking something like this, right? So Acumen, or some sort of data repository, is again in the middle, and the idea is that you're integrating and aggregating the data from all of those sources with the goal of creating that 360 view of your member, right? And so that's been around for years, and where many of us are still striving towards that in some way or another. But the great news with something like this is that you can answer business questions and make critical decisions with the benefit of real evidence rather than gut instinct or tradition. And so how this leads into what we're talking about today is this model is working, right? I mean, this is something that a lot of most even of A2 customers have a model like this. They have their analytical data going to Acumen. They have their AMS and their other technologies which are directly integrated, but we have to start asking, things like, what about integration between those other applications, right? I mean, within your overall technology stack, there could be other miniature stacks, right? So you think about, you have a stack of applications that deal with your marketing and communications. You have a stack of applications that deal with your events. And, this concept of a single central location for all of that, may not be exactly the right approach. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today, and what we've looked at in some other similar type sessions. Are there technologies that help us do that? Are there experts that can help us? And the answer, of course, is yes to both of those. And that's a big part of the reason why we've invited Chris and Beth to talk to us today.
So what Bill says, our research backed up. We really sort of started and raised the research with the first question: what's your technology philosophy? And we really saw sort of two philosophies that seem to be competing: the single solution, this all-in-one AMS solution. But what we see is that that's really given way to this specialized solution. Technologies weren't meeting all the needs of associations. We all expect Netflix and Amazon, and the increasingly digital needs of our customers weren't being met by the existing sort of old school all-in-one single solution. COVID really just accelerated this reality. And so we're really seeing sort of more people come to terms with what their technology philosophy is. We know challenges of upgrading a big AMS. I've done that a few times. It's no small task, and having to deal with customizations or sort of an all-in-one fit doesn't necessarily fit with what your association wants to do. And so that's where we start to see sort of this increase in specialized solutions. So it's important to find the right fit for your association. It's also important to understand the changing landscape and what new options are available. If you can go to the next slide. So we all know that there are going to be cons to any philosophy that you sort of look at, but there are a lot of strengths to both. So with a single solution, for some associations, that will mean a lower cost, an easier implementation, simpler technology skills. So you're really only having to do administration for just one system. On the other side, you've got a specialized system. You really get superior functionality when you're plugging in just, say, a meetings solution, and really you can configure your meetings because that company is really just focused on doing meetings right. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard Reggie Henry from ASAE talk about best of need. So there are best of breed, but what you need isn't necessarily what someone else needs. So you get that superior functionality with those specialized solutions. You also may see a shorter contractual commitment, particularly with things that you might normally not use or were not necessarily central to your AMS before. So things like social media and tagging, that might be something you are just now starting to get into, and you're not having to worry about some multi-year contractual commitment. And with the increase in plug and play options, integration has become so much easier, and a lot of these systems are really integration ready, where it truly is just sort of a plug and play option. So the marketplace is really continuing to evolve. So what was a barrier before to do sort of specialized best of breed, that may no longer be true. And so it's good to sort of look at what strengths are out there and sort of see what different options are available for you.
Okay, just a quick comment as we go to the next slide. Just a kind of solicitation for comments in the chat. Be very curious if anyone on the call is successfully using a single solution right there. And when I say single, it doesn't necessarily mean exactly one, right? Not every single function is in your AMS or one solution, but you know, almost everything, right? So something very far from this best of need type solution that that Beth was just describing. So if anybody has a success story related to that, be great to hear that in the chat.
So Bill, I see some people responding, and I'd like to add that this is a model that is still very common, especially in smaller associations. So as Beth explained, there is a balance, and some of that is related to cost and the complexity of administration. So we see this model often in small associations still today.
And that's why it doesn't need to be sort of one or the other. There really is sort of a spectrum of solutions that sort of will fit within the single solution versus specialized solution option. So sort of where this sort of started, we really think sort of back in the day, all AMSs really wanted to be this monolithic all-in-one. It was going to meet all of your needs. And it's this big sort of one solution for everything. It can't always meet everything. And so you saw associations start to use this, what we call sort of the central solution. And so that is, you know, where you might have most things in your AMS, but you have a couple of sort of things that maybe you have connected through single sign-on, but it might be your communities or your web content solution. And so really your AMS still is your main system, but you start to add a few different functionality to the side. Maybe you have minimal sort of integration with the two, but really, you know, just for single sign-on. But then once you start to become a little bit more complex and start to add maybe additional features or additional functionality or spread it among different systems, that's where we really start to evolve into this orbit system. That's where you're starting to have things more integrated, where you can start to really use that data effectively. When your systems aren't connected to one another, it's very difficult to get very much personalization, much analytics from the data. And so you're really leaving a lot of data out there that you're missing. For instance, web analytics, who's visiting your site, what things are being left in shopping carts or things like that. If you're not sort of connecting the systems or leveraging that integration, you're really sort of leaving a lot out on the table. What ultimately I think is sort of the end goal, if you're looking at the spectrum, is this hub and spoke model that we've sort of seen, where integration providers as a service, iPaaS, has become this middleware solution that allows you to really leverage the plug and play in ways that might not have seemed so feasible in the past. So rather than having to connect to, say, a new meeting system with all of your other systems, you really can pass it through this middleware. And so if you swap out a meeting system in a few years, you're not having to rebuild integrations with all your different systems. That might be a solution to allow your analytics to be brought in, or a data warehouse, or start to ease your way out of an all-in-one option by using sort of this these integration services that a third party can come in and do this sort of iPaaS for you. And we're seeing sort of more people looking at that as an option. And that seems to be sort of this sort of option that you can really take advantage of all of those analytics and bring the value add of all of that data that you're collecting and not leaving it really sort of out on the table.
Hey, Beth, we have a comment from an attendee who says, look, I feel like there should be a tech stack out there that's not AMS or association specific or focused, because in the broader commercial world, we're seeing more special subscriptions and membership type businesses. Like for example, my own example, look, our cell phone service is a subscription and it comes in different tiers. And this feels a lot like an association. So I'll comment on that, and maybe you would like to also. My immediate thought is, I do feel like we're kind of evolving away from over-reliance perhaps on AMS solutions, but I don't think that we're quite there yet for the association world. Remember that our businesses still have unique characteristics, like maybe chapters or special interest groups. We have committees, we have boards and leadership positions that work in different ways, and this creates still a unique association technical and data model that is different than Verizon and T-Mobile. Beth, what are your thoughts on kind of this encroaching commercial approach to the way that people build their stacks for associations?
Yeah, we talked to a couple providers who actually do some of the integration work. So Shuffle Exchange and Fusion Connect, those are a couple of options out there that really know the association world. And, you know, associations aren't that different from commercial option or commercial sort of the corporate world rather, in lots of ways, but in ways that Chris just talked about, there are differences that sort of make associations unique, and that's the exciting thing about associations and why we all are in this space. So it does add value in having a group sort of know those connectors, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other solutions. MuleSoft comes to mind with Salesforce. So Salesforce is a corporate commercial solution. There are certainly in the AMS space as well, but they have MuleSoft built in to be able to do that connection. Microsoft has a similar tool. I can't remember the name of it, but there are certainly options out there to sort of do the plug and play integration with maybe commercial solutions. Maybe you don't need an association specific solution for social or things like that. So bringing in a commercial option is still definitely on the table. And there are commercial solutions for integrating your systems.
Yeah, and I see Bill's also added a comment here asking the group if anybody is using an iPaaS solution, and that's a fancy acronym for Integration Platform as a Service. I hope I got that acronym correctly. And Beth, you just mentioned 2 iPaaS providers. Maybe you could repeat those for the group, and I'm sure curious to know if anybody is using them that's on the line here today.
Sure. Fusion Span, their integration tool is Fusion Connect. And Shuffle Labs, their integration tool is Shuffle Exchange. Both of them are in the association space and know the association world sort of in and out, and have this option to sort of be this additional provider that you sort of bring into the mix as you're looking at your tech stack.
Okay,
great.
So before we go on to the next one, Beth, I wanted to ask you, like, just looking at this sort of evolution, I guess, you know, of different approaches here. I'm looking at orbits. Can you give some example of what's an orbit?
Sure. So when you have a meeting, let's say, you have different functionality around a meeting. So you might have meeting registration. So you want to know, you do have to have some connection to your AMS, or at least know who's a customer so that you can get, or a member so that you can get the right rates. But then you might bring in virtual components for that meeting. So you might have webinar part of it, or produce the content to be deliverable as a podcast. Or you might have but when, you know, we're back out in the non-COVID world, we'll have some on-site functionality or on-site meetings, and you'll have the providers that provide that on-site service and registration on-site. And so you'd have those systems that you want to have a cohesive experience for the member. You might have a mobile app for the meeting. And so bringing all of those, a mobile app for a meeting doesn't necessarily need to be connected to your fulfillment of any books you publish. But you do want it connected to those who are registered and the content that you're producing. And so you might have sort of several systems that are around specific areas that you want to connect that don't necessarily need to be connected to other parts of your business.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, that's really the point that I was going to emphasize. So how this is a little bit different from, you know, that diagram we were looking at before, where kind of like all the data is really being pushed into a central location. The thing with orbits and with the hub, and especially if you're using a service to handle some of these integrations, is that you know, you need to be mindful about what data really needs to be integrated with other applications, right? Because it's not necessarily all of it. And that's why we could sort of emphasize the difference between the analytical data and other types of data and that infinity type diagram, because, you know, there are parts of the data that are in your key source systems that'll be used for analytics. And we talk about this a lot, that are not necessarily part of these orbits, are part of those are part of those hubs, right? Because they're not really transactional in nature or something that you would use to share between systems. It's really something that's used for context and for making business decisions. So, okay, let's go on.
So, we talk a lot, or we've been talking about the AMS, but there is so much functionality sort of beyond the AMS that however you decide to integrate or not integrate those systems, it's important to sort of know what functionality is out there beyond the AMS. So really where we sort of talk about and thought about the providers that are out there, we grouped them in sort of 4 broad categories. So communication, so that might be your email marketing automation or your online advertising, and sort of those tools that you use, the technology that you use to support your systems, to communicate to your members and connecting them through different channels. Your content distribution. So we talked about podcasts and webinars before about that might come out of virtual meetings. And so how are you distributing that content? People consume content in different ways. And particularly now with so many things being virtual, it's good to have sort of a clear guide on how you're going to distribute that content to make sure you're providing value to your members. Providing value to your members comes in lots of other ways too. So when we thought about member benefits, that might be your LMS or your career center, your online communities, those things that really you can point to when really looking at retention and recruitment for your members, and what is their sort of tangible benefits that you're providing for your members. And all of that is built on a foundation. So we've talked about that AMS and how you might integrate it through your middleware or other sort of backend sort of base functionality that really gets into sort of how your foundation is built on all of these systems. All of these systems have a bit of marketing related to it. So Chris and I both come from, marketing backgrounds. Chris, mine goes a little bit further back, and I've been in the IT space more recently. But marketing is so central to everything that we do, and technology is so central to marketing these days. And so really making sure that you're thinking about your technology and sort of a holistic way, but so much of that will come down to really thinking about your marketing in a holistic way and how you look at that in the tech space.
Okay. So apologize for putting you on the spot a little bit, Beth, but this question honestly just occurred to me right now. So a lot of times we're asked about customer journeys, right? And it can be in the macro sense, like things customers do with the association over time, but in this context, from a technology standpoint, it's more often something that's more smaller in nature, like one particular type of conversion, the path they take through the website ultimately to go to the e-commerce site and convert, etc. And so I'm just wondering, in your opinion and your experience, so I would first of all start with most associations, at least the ones that we talk to, are unable to do this effectively, to really effectively track a customer journey. And do you think that's primarily a technology limitation, or is it more conceptual or more strategic, or what's happening there? How can we do better at this?
So I'm going to steal a line from Chris where he has said, where you used to sort of worry about what your marketer's copyright skills were and sort of getting that sort of pitch and how they sort of sell, and now you need to worry about their tech skills. So certainly there is so I'll let Chris sort of expand on that if he wants, but certainly the skills needed for marketers is different than what it was 5-10 years ago. And understanding those journeys, I've heard lots of people, like put it in and forget it. And then people are like, well, don't forget it, because you might constantly need to sort of tweak it and sort of pay attention to it. But understanding how, Salesforce Marketing Cloud works, or Informs, or whichever system you end up using, it's important to understand sort of the tech behind that. And you don't need to be, a IT person or someone who's strictly and not thinking about sort of the strategic things of marketing. But journeys are digital now, and you need to know where they came from to know that, you know, these ads work, or this marketing campaign works, or this one doesn't, and so we should stop spending money on that. And so understanding all of those analytics behind it can help give you better marketing options in the future. Chris, did you want to expand on that? Or
I think that's great.
Right.
Actually, I'm going to repeat something that I said that you cribbed from me. So just sharing this with the group. Absolutely, for 20 years, when I was hiring a new marketing kind of entry-level specialist, I would ask for writing copies, and I would ask them to do some writing in the interview. And I never ask for that anymore, because that writing requirement is such a small portion of what is the new definition for a marketing position. And it's mostly about systems administration and the ability to manage and optimize your marketing through the system.
Okay. Would you guys say that it's fair to say that, like, I mean, you mentioned some of the most commonly used systems, right? The Marketing Cloud, Informs, you know, Real Magnet, things like that. I mean, the systems that we all have, I mean, they can do the things that we want them to do, right? It's just that we haven't used them to their full capabilities. Would you say that's true?
I think it's certainly true that very few of my clients are doing have a test plan that have a scope of optimization that they're trying to accomplish over a period of time. So I see plenty of subject line testing, but not much more than that. And plenty of my clients, maybe most right now, are only doing single channel email journeys. So we're not even taking advantage of multi-channel journeys. So Bill, 15 years ago, we would talk about the customer journey, and it was a big picture discussion. And this was a very convenient kind of theoretical conversation for chief marketing officers. They didn't have tools that allowed them to really manage at the individual level customer or member journeys. Today, this conversation is still kind of held in this abstract way, but in reality, it's very tactically applied at an individual level among associations that are using marketing automation software. And so I think you absolutely have opportunity and easy tools to optimize at the individual level. And then it's a tool like association analytics that we would turn to, like Acumen, that we would turn to understand how many people are at different points in our buying journey, and understand holistically and anonymously how we are moving them from one step to the next.
Awesome. Yes, thanks for that. We got a little off the topic there, and I just want to mention that the nuances of some of these topics, we have whole hours on, you know, coming up at later points in the series. I know we could could easily spend, you know, a full webinar on just that topic alone. You know, in the meantime, anyone who wants more information on that, I'm sure Chris and Beth would be glad to give you some advice. Okay, let's keep going.
So we're going to talk about some stuff outside of the stack, but I'm also going to address some comments that I see in the chat box here. So somebody's asking, like, what kind of marketing automation tools really are working? And I just want to let everybody know that in our paper at ricochetadvice.com/ecosystem, we actually have a copy of what is a really understandable and not too expansive in the end list of association-specific technologies. So I'd encourage you to download the paper and look at that marketplace analysis that we have. It's a fun diagram. And for marketing automation in particular, we're seeing people branch outside of the association specific space into tools like HubSpot, or a tool that Beth shared earlier, Salesforce Marketing Cloud. All right, so actually for this part of the presentation, we're going to take and put to the side a lot of the more technical conversations, and we're going to remind everybody that as you are evolving from one model in that 4-model stack system that Beth showed, that you need to consider more than just technology. For sure, you're going to be thinking about systems integration as you move up the stack. And I'm not suggesting you have to move, but if it's time for you to move to a new model, you're going to think about systems integration. Inevitably, you will also be talking about data and personalization. So the data that you want to collect so that you can have more personalized communications with your members. But here's where it kind of breaks out of the IT department. You need to start having conversations and thinking about responsibilities beyond the changes and responsibilities in IT. And you need to start thinking about skills. I mentioned earlier how my marketing skills that I test for and look for in new staff are not really what you maybe would consider traditional marketing skills. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with a little conversation about analytics and how that's also broken outside of the IT group. And I'm going to be talking a lot, so I'm going to have trouble reading the comments. So maybe Beth could keep me honest and break in with comments as she sees them pass through. So this is a beautiful, lush landscape with a company or with a field that has been covered in kudzu. And if you are in certain parts of the United States, you recognize kudzu as this really terrible weed that is essentially disastrous for your field if you're a farmer and you see it show up, because it is unrelenting in its ability to swallow up all the things in its path, and it works at an incredible speed. So every business presentation that you ever sit in that brings up kudzu talks about the disastrous and negative effects. But today, I'm not talking about disastrous and negative effects. I'm actually going to tell you that you need to create a digital kudzu organization. And what I'm talking about is the ability to take what is typically a technical and somewhat secluded conversation about technical architecture and data integration and spread that out across all of your departments to all of your levels. This is what brings digital change at an organization. So my goal is, as part of this paper, is to help introduce organizations beyond the IT department to conversations about their tech stack. And in fact, Beth and I changed the title of our paper probably 5 times because we were worried that we would alienate non-technical people. So we originally had a paper about the new association tech stack, but that is not what we decided the title was. Now we call it the new association tech ecosystem. We want to change some of the terminology we use to make this more accessible to the membership people in your organization, the meetings people in your organization, and more. In the end, our goal is to make digital and even technical stack conversations something that happens across departments because it affects all departments and at all levels. This should not be just senior. All right.
So Dave, or Chris, I'm sorry. Before we move on, so I was thinking about this kudzu culture thing, and so in our experience, when it's primarily around analytics, but I think it's for any technology, kind of changes in an organization. It's like, kudzu sort of like grows on its own uncontrollably, whereas adoption for technology or adoption for, other things, even remotely technical, is more, requires a lot of care and feeding and a lot of nurturing. And it's more like, I don't know, a bonsai tree or something instead of kudzu.
Yeah, we're going to be struggling for our organic analogies here today.
Yeah, sorry,
right?
Plants are not
test
really
your plant knowledge, right?
Yeah, plants are not my area of expertise by any means. But so how do you, again, this could be a whole webinar in itself, but what are some tips for creating that kudzu culture, right? Because for most things like this, it's kind of the opposite, honestly, in many cases.
Yeah, so I think actually culture is something that is squarely in the C-suite obligation. Everybody can make a contribution to culture, but it is at that C-level that you are obligated to try and create fertile grounds for change. And so I turn to the C and board level organizations to talk to them. And when I talk to them about how they encourage things like failure and how they encourage people to give a shot and how they create cultures of minimal viable product introductions and evolution off of that. So like you said, Bill, this is an entirely separate, probably 3-hour-long presentation, and Beth and I, of course, are going to be happy to come back and chat with you about that. But the short answer is, let's keep it at the top level and don't be and encourage people to take change as embrace change as opportunities to try new things. And certainly 2020 was the year to try new things.
Awesome. Totally agree. All right.
Yeah, actually, I'm even thinking we will come back and we will give that bonsai tree presentation. So you let us know when you want us. All right, so I told you that we're going to talk about kind of 5 things that increasingly happen outside of the IT department. So the first is around integration. And if you are moving up that model scale that Beth shared, the 4 steps, you're undoubtedly going to require more systems integration. And here's the thing that's kind of a challenge. Non-technical people are going to think that your IT department and your staff that does integrations already has the skill set. And just this morning, I was talking to a client who said, we've never done these integrations. We don't know how to do that. And we don't actually have the time to sit down and learn it because we're too busy trying to stay on top of our day-to-day obligations. So as we're creating kudzu, digital kudzu environments, that is up to the top level, at the top level C-suite to create a little space for your IT staff and others to get together and develop a integration skill set. Beth also mentioned IPaaS, and this is an acronym you're going to increasingly hear. Just to remind you, it's Integration Platform as a Service. So whether you work with FusionSpan or Shuffle Exchange or others outside of the association space, they can help expedite this. But this is a new skill set that organizations are going to be picking up as they drive more and more integration. So that's the first zone of change that we're going to see as you move up the evolutionary ladder. And that takes us to the second zone, which is around personalization. And so you can kind of feel that this is escaping the IT department a little bit more. So in personalization, we're thinking a lot about how you capture data and then use it to create unique, individualized experiences. And if I had 3 words to share with you to summarize personalization, it would be personalization ain't easy. Everybody I talk to wants to add personalization. And I worked on a project in 2019 that was trying to do some pretty basic personalization with Salesforce Marketing Cloud. This is just basically, a year and a half ago. And that was a 9-month project to just get some basics down. Personalization requires a lot of data change, a lot of business changes, and more. And it cannot happen. You can't just toss it over to your IT department and say, I want to personalize this. I want this content in an email personalized. It requires a very strong partnership between the business, somebody that has a member first focus and a deep member understanding of their needs, and technical skills. So again, we can see the kudzu growing out of the IT department. That takes us into the next level, which is around responsibilities. I mentioned earlier that IT organizations have to pick up integration skills, like really technical skills, but the change in responsibilities does not end there. The kudzu spreads, and we work with all sorts of departments. Actually, the best example I think of this is what happened to meeting departments at associations in 2020. So previously, meeting planners were really skilled in site selection and conference venue negotiations and the legalities around that, and putting together partnerships maybe with travel providers and thinking through very tactical details to ensure a smooth in-person experience. And in essentially March of 2020, we ripped away all of those responsibilities for meeting planners and told them, nope, you have to be digital. It doesn't always happen overnight. You could almost probably choose the day at your association that digital kudzu took over the responsibilities and changed the responsibilities of the meeting department. But this is the type of change that we're talking about. It is that there will be meaningfully different responsibilities for a department as it becomes, and for individuals in that department as it becomes digitally enabled. All right, moving on to the fourth area, skills. So this is the story I tell over and over. For 20 years, I asked every marketing specialist candidate to show me writing samples and to do a writing example in front of me, write an email in front of me. And it occurred to me 18 months ago that this is a foolish request. Why am I asking them this? I should be asking them to sit down with me maybe and work through some Excel questions or some Google Sheets questions, or pulling up maybe our social media management tool, if they're familiar with something maybe as basic as Hootsuite or something more complicated like HubSpot, and talk to me about how they would manage and optimize that. Maybe ask them to show me how they work in Canva or Photoshop. These are the skills that make up a marketer's digital toolbox today. the writing, it's such a small part. And frankly, if you're doing it right, you're optimizing against that writing. So you could have some bad writing out there and it just fades away because it doesn't perform. And maybe your better writing on banners or other advertisement rises to the top. So when we talk about upskilling, this is what I'm talking about. We are upskilling into new individual abilities. And then, Bill, I know that we've kind of reached your favorite. This is analytics. So I'm going to tell a little story from the past, and then I think that it would be exciting to hear from you and some thoughts about how association analytics thinks about kudzu taking over more than just the IT department and bringing digital analytics to the full organization. So my first job, this is in the early 90s, was working for a large national retailer, and they had on Beth's model chart, they had a monolith tech stack model. It was the very first one, the big bubble. And that national retailer, you can probably guess who it is. Their name rhymed with Macy's. So at Macy's, every Monday morning, I would walk into work and I wouldn't even go to my desk. I'd go up to the IT department and I would pick up this 6-inch big pile of printed reports. And we would take those down and we would analyze them. And I'm not joking, it was like a serious stack of printed reports with the perforated edges and everything. And in that monolith model, I could not change any of the analytics that I wanted. There was no additional reporting that was available, and there was no additional kind of back end side shadow sources for me to pull from. That was the core, that was the personification of the digital model. Now, as you're evolving your stack and pushing up that evolutionary chain, and things are becoming more distributed, and people have better skills, and departments have kind of more digital responsibilities, what we're seeing is also that the sources for analytics are more plentiful, and that they might do some side projects on their own. And the opportunity to aggregate and pull that data into a central location that then does some cross-channel and cross-touch point analysis is also more available. So what I think would be interesting to chat about is first maybe a little conversation around some of the quandaries on how you do this, how you pull all this data together. We heard in our research a bit of a challenge and different perspectives. And then I'd love to hear what Association Analytics thinks about analytics in an evolved tech ecosystem. So Beth, maybe you could talk a little bit about the quandary that people are facing as they move up this ecosystem chain to something that's more of a hub and spoke model.
Sure, and this sort of goes to one of the questions or comments that was in the chat, that you need data for personalization. So that quandary that we sort of see is, making sure that data is connecting to all of your systems and that you're able to use that data across systems. So in the supporting the hub concept. So in the sort of monolithic all-in-one AMS, you might know that someone attended a meeting last year. So when you have that same meeting the next year, you want to make sure to send an invite to them saying, thanks for attending last year. Here's the meeting again, sign up again. But those emails might have a different marketing functionality or different marketing sort of terminology that work or doesn't work. And so you want to know if they've opened the email. You want to know if they've gone to the website and stopped midway because maybe there was a problem on the website, or maybe they forgot and you want to remind them. So having some web analytics, having email open rates, having information about places they've been to on the website that maybe they didn't attend last year, but you see that they're all on pages that are similar, so you want to send something. So having that data support the hub gives you both the ability to do personalization, but can do analysis and do analytics off of those different systems. That sort of is within the hub. There's some data that you don't necessarily need sort of real-time login information or real-time personalization for when they sort of visit your website or what have you. And so that might be when you create a shadow. Some of the shadow might be real-time, but often a data warehouse, you're looking at trends over a long period of time, or you're looking at sort of snapshots. And so it doesn't need to necessarily be real-time, but whichever way you use, having that sort of say a data warehouse to sort of create shadow data, to look at your data more holistically, for you to do the analysis off of it and create analytics, dashboards and reports for the C-suite on down, so that you can be agile in sort of changing a subject line or what have you. I mean, I think one of the things that associations, I don't think it's limited to associations, but something that is a little bit new for associations is that need to pivot and to look at sort of be able to be agile and look at things and change, on the fly. And so if a subject line is not opening, nobody's opening an email because of one subject line, you want to change it. Having the analytics in either supporting the hub as part of one of the spokes, or as sort of a warehouse creating a shadow, is important for to help you sort of make those decisions. And that's the quandary of how you might store your data and connect your systems.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. So this is a really good segue into what I wanted to do to kind of wrap things up in our last few minutes here. And that is to talk about how analytics and BI fits into all of that, right? So we talked a little bit about, the 2000s version and the 2010s version, which looked a little bit different. And so just loosely, right? I mean, my decades might not align exactly, but the 2020s version, right? What's been happening in the last couple of years is we've seen more of a hybrid model. And so this diagram, or a variant of this, was something you saw in a recent webinar we did about systems of action, versus systems of record, right? And the idea here is that we're actually, it's not as much of a quandary, it's more of a hybrid model where we have where we support the hub, right? So you had this internal hub here, which is an iPaaS type solution. It manages all of those individual integrations with your different source systems or your different orbits. But then you also have both the hub itself as well as individual applications sending data to your data warehouse or your data lake. So a product like Acumen is itself a hybrid of a data lake and a data warehouse, and we can then communicate with your data hub or your iPaaS solution, and then we can also integrate individually with all of your source systems that make up that 360 view of your customer. And the awesome thing about that is that now we have the benefit of all of those real-time integrations, but then we also have that, and although it's a different set or a different subset of the same data, we also have the data that pertains to long-term trends over time. It pertains to large amounts of unstructured data, for things like emails or communities or abstract or things like that. So we can have the benefit of all those different types of data for the purpose of making decisions about our members and about our products and services and so forth. So I just want to go through a few things. There's a few obligatory Acumen screenshots here. And the idea here is that if you remember that orbits, that orbits diagram, so an orbit is almost like a tech stack, right? And so, and when you have this hybrid model that we just looked at, you can still have an orbit, right? So some of your marketing applications are only really communicating with other marketing applications, but then some are connected to everything else. And so, so marketing is a good example of one type of orbit where you might have your membership or your CRM systems, and you want them to communicate with your email marketing, right? So that you can then look at things like the performance of different campaigns with different segments of membership and monitor those conversions. And you want to also have that integrated with things like web analytics and social media, right? So you have a lot of activity going on in your website. Some of that comes from social media. Some of that comes from from calls to action in your marketing messages. And when you think about your marketing tech stack and how that cooperates with each other to give you, the picture of engagement and allows you to start piecing together that customer journey, this is something that we have to think about. And a tool like Acumen is going to really be useful for you in doing that. Likewise with events, right? I mean, more and more events is its own, technology stack. Again, you start with your membership or your CRM. You might have a different system that takes care of your registrations for a conference. Within that conference, especially if it's virtual, you have registration data on sessions and pre-conference workshops and things like that. And we have all sorts of cool data that we never had before, like how long did I stay at the session? You don't have to walk around and like count heads in the meeting rooms and things like that. We want to also then understand our exhibits and show floor analyses, our advertisers, our sponsorships. We need that demographic breakdown of all of our attendees to even get the advertisers and the sponsors to begin with. And all of those things, communicate with each other on some level, often with great effort, right? And so if we can have that hub technology, to manage a lot of that, and then push just the required data into our warehouse, for decision making, then that's going to give us the best of both. And finally, engagement is kind of like the holy grail for all of this. So we want to be able to look at all the things that our customers and our members do, both individuals and organizations. And like it or not, it just doesn't all happen in one system, right? So when it comes to an engagement, you may be successful in other areas with the monolith type solution, but if you really want to have a true picture of engagement, you really do have to bring in data from some of these other sources, and that's really a shadow type thing. That's something where you need a repository like Acumen for analytics data. You can get parts of that with just a hub, but the full picture is going to require something a little bit different. So I think a hybrid type solution would be ideal for that. Okay, so to bring us home, a couple of things, key takeaways, and I'll turn this over to Beth.
So, technology is not a one size fits all. You've heard a lot today, and you really need to take stock of your stack and sort of review where your gaps might be, and that's a good place to sort of start.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Take a look at now and see what you've got. Engage in departmental leaders. As Chris said, this is, so much of this is related to strategy, but strategy outside of the tech, outside of IT, you really have to look and make sure you're engaging people from all the departments. Begin that upskilling, webinars like this and remote learning at this time, is a really great opportunity to use this time to really upskill some of your areas where you might not be as strong. And determining your measurements. I mean, we were talking about analytics here, and you really, what was needed before might not be what you need now. And so what measurements are you looking for that you're not getting now, and sort of determine where you want to go from here.
All right. So just as another reminder, the paper that we've been referencing that Chris and Beth have put together is available. It's at ricochetadvice.com/ecosystem. So encourage everybody to go and download that. And yes, I want to thank Chris and Beth for joining us for a great session. Thanks to the audience. We had some good questions, some really good comments throughout, and there are a bunch of upcoming sessions that kind of hit on some of the topics that we talked about today. We're going to have one related to culture of analytics, personalization. We talked about. We're lucky enough to have Dave from PropFuel joining us next week. Dave's on the webinar today. We're going to talk about intelligent engagement and how that helps to drive action, and it really helps a lot with personalization as well. So that's coming up in 2 weeks, March 11th at 3 p.m. So hope everyone can join us. And again, I wanted to thank Chris and Beth and everyone for spending an hour with us today.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much.
All right, take care, everyone.